Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting for the 30th of June 2022 and the time is 1 p.m. We'll call attendance and we have every council in the room except for Councillor Andrew Fechner, and I'd like to look at Andrew joining us via audio link. So I move that in accordance with section 254K of the Local Government Regulations and of Council's meeting procedures, Councillor Andrew Fechner be permitted to participate in the meeting via an audio link. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. It's unanimous in the room. And welcome, Councillor Fechner.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll move on to the acknowledgement of country, and Councillor Councillor, would you mind doing us the honours?
Ipswich City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered, acknowledging our gratitude that we share this land today, but also acknowledging the cost of that sharing and our hope that we can move to a better place of justice and partnership together, and we welcome opportunities for further engagement.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor. We'll now move to the opening prayer, and I ask Councillor Island if she would lead us into prayer.
Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace as we make decisions that affect the citizens of Ipswich City, and continue to remind us that all we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of our community and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Island. We have no apologies or leaves of absences. Item 5, there are no condolence motions. Item 6, there are tributes. There are no tributes. Item 7 is the presentation of petitions, and this petition relates to item 16.6, provisional project approval as well. So just going to that. There's a petition for chess furniture within Ravel Domain, Springfield Central. Would the Division 2 Council like to move or second? And
yeah, I'm happy to move.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Johnny.
Seconded.
Second. Thank you, Councillor Tully. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you. Just wanted to highlight the hard work of Ed in the community. He's been working hard with junior chess players for several years, and I visited him along with Councillor Island in the September holidays last year, and I lost chess in about a minute against some young astute players. So Ed's a great man and he does a lot for the community, and he's very inspired by teaching young students. So I will be happy to speak more on the provisional item coming up.
Okay.
And he's very happy with the result as well. So okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnny. Councillor Tully is the seconder. Would you like to speak to this as well?
No, I just endorse those words, and then we'll have the substantive debate soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'll just check with the two divisional councils. Would you like this petition to be referred to the relevant council area for review? Or how would you like this? Just
possible to receive a note.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. So you've moved that the petition will be received and noted. It's been seconded. Any other discussion? Put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chambers. How do you vote, Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. Move on to item 8, and there are no presentations or deputations. Item 9, there's no public participation. And now we're up to item 10, matters of public interest, and there are none. Now 11, declarations of interest on matters of the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? Yep. Do you mind putting your microphone on, please, Councillor Island? Thank you, Councillor Island.
I will declare again my conflict under growth and infrastructure. the report, I might need help on which report it was. The committee was the 16th of June and I declared it there, but I'd like to declare that in accordance with section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 6, titled Development Application 19897 /2021/MCU. The recommendation, Griffiths Group 1 Proprietary Limited, a trust for a childcare centre at Brassel. The nature of my interest is that my grandson attends the childcare centre at Clem Street in Brassel, and I invite the other councillors present to determine if I can continue to participate in the decision process.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I note at the time in the GIW, I think all of us here, there was already we had a vote and a decision that there was not a conflict of interest, that you could stay in the room.
Okay. I just wasn't sure whether that was a recommendation or whether that was an actual decision. And, you know, all these conflicts, I just wanted to cover all my bases, but thank you.
Thank you. So the
Could I
GIW, I'll
just-
just confer with the CEO, but the GIW is has a delegation, so a decision was made on that particular item, and this report's just noting. But I think
No, that item is actually a recommendation to
Right,
council.
okay.
That particular, the GIW committee, if you look at it, some of the items are decisions and some are
Yes.
recommendations, including that one. And I think, even though that was open to all councillors, my view would be that when it gets to council, that's a separate decision, whether or not Councillor Ireland has a conflict and what she's permitted to do. But I will move that she be, as she has no personal benefit in the matter, that she be permitted to stay, speak and vote on the matter.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Any other discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I think it's unanimous, noting that Councillor Ireland didn't vote. Councillor Fickner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest in the matters on the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Jacob Madsen, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 15.6, minutes of Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is I'm a member of the executive of the Ipswich Trades Hall and Labor Day Committee, and our building, the Ipswich Trades Hall, is adjacent to Council's CBD redevelopment. As a result of my conflict of interest, I'll leave the meeting room while the matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Are there any other declarations of interest?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fickner.
In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act, I, Councillor Andrew Fickner, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 15.6, titled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's report. The nature of my interest are both of my business interests in Bar Heisenberg Proprietary Limited and A1A Events Proprietary Limited, both located in the top of town. I plan on dealing with the matter by leaving the virtual meeting while the matter is discussed and voted on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fickner. Any other declarations of interest? No, thank you very much, and thank you all three councillors for making those disclosures. Move on to item 12, the confirmation of minutes, and I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of May 2022 be confirmed. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I open it for any queries. Yes, Councillor Tully?
I've just got a matter I wish to clarify with the CEO, and it was a matter that I raised yesterday, and it goes back to the last meeting in relation to two questions that I've recently asked at a council meeting. Now, I note that in these minutes, and I think it was a matter raised by Councillor Fickner, that answers to questions formally asked in the council meeting would be recorded in the minutes, not necessarily as an addendum, but I note that the minutes before us to adopt the minutes of or the motion to adopt the minutes of our last meeting doesn't include, as I would have expected, those responses to those two questions. So it probably can be resolved by an amendment to include those responses to the two formally in the minutes, not as addendums or attachments and things like that. So hopefully I've explained that well enough, but I'll just, for the purposes
I think what you're trying to say, that the questions on notice, was on notice that we've been given the responses, you want them as part of the minutes. Is that what you're requesting?
And I will move that the responses to those two relevant questions be incorporated as an amendment now, but incorporated into these minutes.
Yep. I'll just defer to the CEO on any views on that.
Happy to do so, Chair. We, as was determined by Council at its last meeting, have been looking at the procedure for enacting that in order to, I guess, do so in the most effective way. In the case of the two matters that Councillor Tully had raised, one was quite a concise response, and that was the matter of the flood data that we followed up after the last meeting. But the one that had been responded to prior to Councillor Tully and shared with all councillors was quite a lengthy briefing note of some 8 to 9 pages. So I guess we're just looking for an efficient solution. That's quite a volume of material to include in the minutes, but if that is what the council wants, then that is what we will do. I guess if there's a number of either matters taken on notice or questions on notice, that will potentially be cumbersome, but again, if that's what the council seeks, we can give effect to that.
So I think what we're looking at is there's nothing in the meeting procedures policy for questions on notice to be put in the minutes.
Not at this stage, but the council resolved that we look at a procedure for that.
Yeah, and we can do that today in respect of those two questions, or two answers. And as I say, Councillor Fechner raised the issue, and I think there was no dissent from that suggestion that responses to formal questions in a meeting be recorded in the minutes.
Thank you again, through you, Mayor, as Chair. What we had recorded in the minutes was Councillor Fechner requesting that they be attached to the minutes rather than, I guess, incorporated in. But either way, the matters that the responses to the matters that you had raised have been published, as you're aware, to the community and to yourselves as councillors, but separately, not incorporated within the minutes, yes.
And that's the very issue I'm raising. When you go to this item and look at the minutes that we're about to adopt, it doesn't have any reference to those answers because they just seem to drop off. Yeah. Well, if they were real attachments, they'd be attached. So if I could just ask that, as per my motion, that it just be formally adopted in these minutes.
Thank you.
I mean, as the mover of these minutes, I'm happy with that. Councillor Doyle, are you happy with that as well? Thank you. Any other queries? Thank you. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chambers. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 13, and there's no mayoral minute. As per the email that I sent out to all councillors on the 27th of June, I'm going to move a procedural motion to change the order of the reports. That agenda item 16.2, titled Wanless Ministerial Call-in Council Submission to the Minister for State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government Planning, during public notification, be brought forward and dealt with at this time. The report is due by 5 o'clock today, and we've got quite a meaty agenda. All the responses I've had so far from councillors was in the positive. I had none in the negative. So I'll move that. I think as a procedural motion, it doesn't need to be seconded. That's correct. So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. And Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's unanimous and carried. So we're moving to 16.2. So 16.2 is basically Council's response to the Wanless ministerial call-in, and the recommendation here is that Council endorse the submission as contained in attachment A. I will move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. In discussing this item, I'd like to thank the officers who have compiled this comprehensive submission in response to the Deputy Premier's consideration of using ministerial call-in powers. Specifically, the Deputy Premier, as the Planning Minister, is considering whether to use his call-in powers to consider Council's part refusal of the Wanless application filed and decided under 10674/2019/CA. Council's decision to approve the recycling component while rejecting the landfill part was based on sound assessment against our planning scheme, considered by our independent review panel, and based on careful and thorough consideration of the independent review panel's considered opinion. Ipswich has sufficient landfill capacity for decades to come, and there is no logical need for more landfill operations. Our city is sick of being the state's dumping ground, and we want to see greater regulation and compliance of existing waste operations. Our community has made it clear that they don't want any more landfills, and we need to listen to them. I call on the Deputy Premier, when making his decision to call in this development or not, to take all of this into consideration. In my view, the Deputy Premier should, having reviewed Council's decision, consider there is no state interest and decline to use his powers. Alternatively, the Deputy Premier could call in the project and, having given consideration to its merits, uphold Council's original decision. Previous planning ministers have declined on 3 occasions to use call-in powers in these circumstances, resulting in Council using $8 million in ratepayers' money fighting private waste operators. I ask the Deputy Premier, please listen to our residents, listen to our planning experts, and listen when we say we don't need this in our community. I'll open it up for any other discussion. No other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. And in the room, it's myself, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Johnny, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Milligan, Councillor Kunzelman. How do you vote, Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative.
Thank you. Those against? There is no one against. Abstaining? Thank you, Councillor Tully, for that vote. It's carried. And I think, CEO, if we could get that sent off ASAP, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So we go back now to the order of business, which is item 14, business outstanding. So update on previous matters outstanding. And the first I have here is a question on notice at the Ordinary Council meeting of the 19th of May, which was that the Chief Executive Officer follow up as a matter of priority the response for this question on notice, and that a procedure be implemented to ensure prompt responses to any future questions on notice. And I understand this is now occurring, CEO?
Through you, Chair, Mayor and Councillors, so this relates back to the discussion just had a short while ago. The question on notice to the CEO that was raised some months ago was followed up, the answer was provided, and that is one of the matters that Councillor Tully has just referred to as being included in the minutes. And yes, we are working on a procedure per the previous discussion to deal with future questions on notice and incorporating those in the minutes.
Thank you, CEO. There are now 4 matters taken on notice from the Ordinary Council meeting of the 19th of May. Now, my understanding of that all 4 items, the councillors have been informed. CEO, noting the conversation today, are you able to provide an update to the public on the status of each of these?
Certainly, can do. So, Mayor and Councillors, on the 22nd of June, per the matter taken on notice, a briefing note was provided to councillors on the 31st of May this year by the General Manager, Infrastructure and Environment Department in relation to the assessment and repair of council's sporting club assets that were damaged by the 2022 flooding and rain events. A range of immediate minor works have been completed on the damaged sporting club assets, and Council has engaged an external expert who has commenced asset condition assessments with those sporting clubs being a priority. Senior council officers have attended each sporting club to meet and discuss the damages and repairs required, and council teams are prioritising the completion of all possible minor works to restore the sporting clubs to operation, while major works required are assessed and subsequently planned and programmed for future delivery. In relation to the insurance aspect of the matter taken on notice, there'll be a councillor briefing session on the 5th of July 2022, next Tuesday, on risk and insurance matters, and the insurance of council's sporting club assets or otherwise will be discussed, and councillors will be briefed on that. If there's no questions on that, I can move on to the next one. No questions? The next matter taken on notice was in relation to the actions, this was raised by Councillor Jonik, in relation to providing councillors with local office space. So further information has been provided to Councillor Jonik and Councillor Tully on that, and discussion, as it indicates, discussion is ongoing with those two councillors. I've received a response from Councillor Tully. So. And then in relation to the next matter, so this is the matter of the financial model due to be delivered to council by the QTC. So a briefing session has been scheduled for Tuesday the 5th of July for the Queensland Treasury Corporation to brief the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Standing Committee, together with Councillors Tully and Ireland, on the decision-making model for the management and ownership of the Nicholas Street precinct going forward. QTC is in the process of handing over the financial forecasting and returns model software to Council's NSP team, including the completion of knowledge transfer and training to support the most effective use of that software by Council. So that the handover is underway. And after the 5th of July 2022 briefing session, QTC will finalise a report that will be presented to the Standing Committee and Council.
Thank you, CEO.
In relation to the next matter, which was for the General Manager, Planning and Regulatory Services, to provide a briefing note to councillors on the status of construction of the new heated pool at the Georgie, Conway, Leichhardt Community Swim Centre. An update has been provided to councillors on the current status, and there has been no DA for a material change of use submitted by the pool operator. There is work continuing by the pool operator on the design of the proposed new pool, and concurrently council officers are working on new heating option, electric heating option for the current pool, but there has been no DA applied for in relation to the new pool construction.
Any questions, Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Mayor. Probably can be dealt with within our office. Councillor Fechner and I were seeking an update with regard to the heaters and the status of that. So very separately and outside of the DA and the construction of the new pool. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. We now move on to a matter that's been lying on the table. We have a matter, item 14.1, which is currently lying on the table. So I'll move that it be lifted from the table. And any discussion on the matter being lifted? I'll put that to the vote, that matter be lifted. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you very much. So this matter was laid on the table of the ordinary council meeting on the 19th of May until council met today. And it's item 14.1, which is the Community Engagement Report on the naming of the bridge on Sinathamby Boulevard, Springfield Central, and the renaming of Pasali Drive, Umanta. And there are 3 recommendations there. And I'd like to move all 3 recommendations there. Plus, at the last meeting, I did put a variation in for C. If you could bring that up, Vicky. That is that having considered the community sentiment and suggested options, the CEO is to work with the relevant Indigenous groups, and they will decide the new names for these assets in accordance with the council's naming procedure. Do I have a seconder for those 3? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Thank you. I now move for discussion on this item.
So I would like to discuss some issues with this item through you, Chair. So the facts that I would like to point out was the adopted mayoral minute on the 9th of December 2021 clearly stated that a report be prepared for a council meeting no later than May 2022 that outlines community sentiment on the renaming, costs associated, options for the potential renaming of these assets. I emphasise the fact that this includes community sentiment on the renaming, along with options for the potential renaming. The reason I'm highlighting the recommendation wording specifically is because I have a copy of the community engagement report that looks quite different to the one that is included in the attachments today. The community engagement report that I have and that I will circulate with fellow councillors has a total of 6,968 community contributions received compared to the current report tabled, which has only 528. This is 75% of the community who gave feedback during the engagement that have been disregarded in the current report. In the report I will circulate, page 4, under item 1.3, community sentiment states, comments received in stage 2 and 3 identified a strong sentiment that opposed the decision to change the name of either asset. In stage 2, 2,026 of 3,745 contributions did not support a name change for either asset. In stage 3, 54% of comments on social media were against the name change. The reaction to all comments were tallied, and 88.5% of the reactions were against changing the names. Data was collected from participants during each engagement phase from all methods in accordance with Council's information privacy policy. Quantitative data was downloaded from various digital platforms and transcribed into a master Excel database by project staff. The data was cleaned, de-identified, aggregated and charted in the master database, and then open thematic analysis of the data and comments was carried out using Excel. Under item 5 of the report, labelled conclusion, a review of the data identified that the primary sentiment identified through the community engagement was a preference not to change the names of the assets. This sentiment was prevalent in both stage 2 and 3 of the engagement. The most common reasons provided opposing the change of the name was a waste of council money, followed by comments that reflected the history of the former Mayor Paul Pasali. It appears that the social media engagement has been subtracted from the current report, reducing the community participation by 75%. Previously, I've witnessed social media engagement that has been included in other reports, like Council's Natural Environment Strategy, Council's Recreational Cycling and Walking Action Plan, even Council's Corporate Plan, to name a few. As part of Shape Your Ipswich website, under Frequently Asked Questions, the question is tabled, what do we mean by community engagement? And community engagement is a process by which community and council work together to facilitate community input into council decision making. Ipswich City Council is committed to meaningful engagement with the community on issues affecting the city and on local issues that significantly impact the community. Community engagement is the foundation of sustainable decision making and is mutually beneficial to the community and to council. Under Council's community engagement policy regarding purpose and principles, the purpose of this policy is to provide council with a framework to guide a consistent, transparent and effective approach to community engagement. And the following principles, which I will highlight, we deliberately include as many people as we can. We aim to be inclusive and connect with those hardest to reach, and we genuinely listen at every stage. Genuine engagement requires active listening. Council recognises that only communities who feel they have been genuinely listened to will be meaningfully involved. This doesn't mean always agreeing, but showing people how their ideas and participation have influenced outcomes and contributed to decision making. We have discounted the views of the overwhelming majority of respondents. Is it because the topic in question is sensitive? If so, many residents that made the choice to participate are not being actively listened to? Why are we trying to erase the view? And what risk does this place on this local government? I also note that the Community Engagement Officer who signed off the original report has not signed off this report that's currently in our paperwork. And despite the Mayor seeking these changes to the report, I question the appropriateness of this conduct, which also leads me to question the recent resignation of this Community Engagement Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. There's quite a few things that you've mentioned there. I think what you're raising is that you've seen an early version of the report there, because it is different to the final report. That's correct. I believe the early report was published in error before being finalised. However, that would be a matter for the CEO to address.
There are many points that have been raised by Councillor Johnick. Chair, thank you.
I was just going to deal with the first one first, I guess.
Okay, so that being, you're asking me about the earlier version of the report?
Yes.
Yep. So the report that Councillor Johnick is referring to, and I believe said that she would be tabling today, is that what you said? Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for the broader audience, the community, that was a report that was drafted and was destined for the Governance and Transparency Committee that was due to meet on that did meet on the 5th of May. On being asked questions about the report, I reviewed the report as the CEO, and I formed a view that the options that were included in that report and the recommendations, but more so the attachment of the report, did not deliver in line with, as I saw it and interpreted it, the resolution that this council made in relation to Resolution C. And as an officer, as a CEO, I've made an interpretation on the advice and in consultation with the responsible general manager, that the job that was on us, the task that we had, was to bring forward a report for a council meeting, as has been noted, no later than May of this year, that outlines community sentiment on the renaming of those assets of the bridge and the drive, costs associated and options for the potential renaming of these assets in line with council's naming procedure. I formed a view that we were not being asked to engage with the community on sentiment in relation to the denaming, that decision having already been made by the council, and the decision that was made by the council to consult the land holders, landowners, in relation to Pasali Drive. The options for potential renaming of the assets in line with council's naming procedure could not be names of politicians, whether current, former, or political themes. So I could not form a view that it was the job that was asked of us to bring forward a report that brought forward community sentiment on the denaming and suggested that the name should be left in place, because that would not be in line with council's naming procedure. So I'll be accountable for that. That's the view that I took, and hence I did not feel that I could allow that report to come to the Governance and Transparency Committee, and hence amendments were made to the report, and they're brought forward in the form that you considered at the council meeting on 19 May.
Thank you, CEO. And I think, Councillor John, in response to some of the other queries, this report has come to Council in response to a mayoral minute endorsed on the 9th of December 2021, where Council agreed and endorsed to dename Paul Pasali Bridge, Springfield Central and Pasali Drive, Yamanto, and asked the community to suggest new names for these assets. The Council's naming procedure states that any proposed name change shall not proceed unless there is clear support, 75% or above, from businesses and residents affected by the proposed change. All landowners on Pasali Drive agreed to the renaming, except one that couldn't be reached. I'm delighted to hear that these landowners also took the opportunity to put their new name suggestions forward. Council received hundreds of suggestions from the community via Shape Your Ipswich and at council pop-up sites for a range of new names for these assets. As you'd expect, social media was also abuzz with suggestions and commentary about councils and the landowners' decision to rename these assets. Disappointingly, but not surprisingly, many of these comments were critical of the decision, dismissing or discounting the serious crimes of Ipswich's former mayor. I make no apologies for this decision. I committed as part of my election campaign to rename these assets, and I'm fulfilling that commitment. I thank the majority of councillors in this room for supporting that decision. I also make no apologies for acting on behalf of landowners that were embarrassed by their former address. Rightfully so, they will also have their wish fulfilled today. I'm excited to see so many wonderful suggestions come forward from the Ipswich community. I know that one of the leading suggestions was, of course, for Ash Barty. While Ash is honoured to be considered so highly by her local community, we all know she's incredibly humble and doesn't seek personal recognition for her achievements. I have received notification this week from Ash's team that she would prefer to see one of the other very worthy suggestions proceed instead of an individual accolade for herself. And there was another thing that you stated, Councillor Johnick, in regards to whether there was any inappropriateness. And I've got to say that as the initiator of the mayoral minute, I did seek to have a view of an early version of the report, just like we do, just like I think Councillor Johnick, when we were developing the economic development strategy, there are early versions and we work together on things. When I saw the early version, I provided feedback to the CEO to ask about the social media commentary. It's not in the community engagement policy, and I left that decision to the CEO. Any inference that I did anything improper, I rebuke absolutely. I've got here a page from the Windage report, and I'm going to read this out and say why I'm so offended by that inference. So page 32 of the Windage report, which is chapter 7, improper use of power and influence, and it talked about the previous council identified that they were, of some of the actions they did, there was a general lack of understanding and training of council employees about what elected officials can and cannot influence, and may have contributed to the improper use of influence and power by senior members of Ipswich City Council. It also goes on to state that a council was identified interfering with council processes that were outside the scope of his role. Investigations identified that the interference of these processes was often motivated by the desire to assist close associates. In many cases, the behaviour was either ignored or not reported by council staff due to the seniority of those involved. All of us get involved with council papers. I asked a simple question of the CEO about that. The community engagement policy is quite clear. It doesn't talk about taking in Facebook comments. We've had discussions when we were doing the planning scheme whether we would take Facebook comments into consideration, and Councillor Teller, you were quite strident in that we shouldn't be taking Facebook comments. We have a Shape Your Ipswich page. Every Facebook post that was made by council, it referred people to go to the Shape Your Ipswich page, and so those people could be accountable. We don't know where everyone from Facebook is from. The report also had it also recorded Facebook comments from the Queensland Times. So it recorded the comments on Facebook, on other Facebook pages. So I left that to the CEO for her decision, and you've heard her decision this afternoon.
I've got some views to share with the meeting this morning. I actually consider that the particular vote that I made on the Merrill Minute in December, that's the only vote that I actually regret in my time at council. And I regret it for one key reason. That was put on us on the spot in the chamber. A number of councils here in this council did not have any prior notice that that was happening on that morning. I'm very proud that we've changed the meeting procedures so that Merrill Minutes can't just be dropped on people at a moment's notice and then a decision's expected. I actually consider that the way that that was executed was a bit of wedge politics. And we shouldn't be engaging in wedge politics. We should be making prudent decisions that we're considering. I think, you know, on most things you should have a couple of days to think about it, talk to others about it, sleep on it. Sleeping before making a decision is some of the best advice you will receive in life. So that initial Merrill Minute, and that's created some of the issues for this report. The Merrill Minute is poorly written, in my opinion. It makes a decision before doing the community sentiment. I regret not in the moment, you know, standing up and saying, you know, I need time to consider this and whether or not it's actually written appropriately. I want to know the community's views on matters like this. But instead, I was a bit afraid to actually speak to it because of the sensitivities about the former mayor. And, you know, if you make any comment one way or another, you can be taken to have some form of clandestine political agenda, and that's not the case. That's why I reject the wedge politics that was utilised in pursuing this. I've actually discussed this matter previously with the CEO. I don't agree with her interpretation at all. Because it's in the committee that I chair, I actually read that report when it was accidentally published to my committee. Nobody mentioned anything about it, and then I saw it come in the ordinary council meeting, and it was a different report. So that was a red flag. Again, it's one of those things, right? Like, we're elected to make these decisions. I've got no pleasure in deliberating on this matter at any length. I actually agree with the community that we should get on with the job of governing the city. We've got other concerns that we should be putting our time towards. I've been contacted by community members in favour of changing it. I had a particular family Christmas meal where 12 people around the table lined up and told me, why are you spending your time on that? Go and have a look at the road that we just travelled to your house from. So there's so many issues with this, and none of it is really about talking to the community, because if we're relying on this interpretation that it was denamed in December without people sitting down and considering it, I don't think that you would appreciate the wedge politics, Mayor, and I don't think others would. Being put on the spot like that isn't something I agree to. So in sum, I think I've covered it off. I think this is just an embarrassment of the whole council, really, this entire process, and we have to do better. I mean, I don't want to make that my catchphrase today, but we do. The community expects us to do better. We're community leaders, and, you know, there's all these bullet holes in our bloody decision-making.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doyle?
Wow, a lot to unpack there, but you're going to have to be patient with me because I haven't had the benefit of time that clearly many in this chamber have. So as Councillor Madsen has pointed out, we shouldn't have to be making these decisions last second on the fly. I wasn't afforded notice of this ahead of it being raised today. So I guess that's probably my first concern and objection. I would like to go on record. I've never heard of the concept of wedge politics, but most of you know I'm not the political beast that others are. However, what I am, and I don't think anyone would argue against, I am independent, I am very outspoken, and I will not be coerced or forced into making a decision that I do not back or stand by. Now, I challenge anybody in this room to find an individual that thinks it's okay, passes a pub test, or is acceptable to name an asset after a politician or the politician's family. I challenge you all.
We are having this discussion today and we are in this predicament because we used to go down the path of attaching our names to these assets. Now, back to December, there was a resolution of this council to dename both the assets. That was done. The third part of that was to conduct community engagement. Unpacking on the fly, it looks like that may have been botched. So I'm now seeking, I guess, from the CEO some direction and guidance on what our next steps should be procedurally. Not interested in all the other stuff. Given that it was a resolution of this council and the assets have been denamed, if it's only Part C that becomes problematic, what is our next step? Also, CEO, I would like some advice. I take my role very, very seriously. My former role as a lawyer ensures and sees me every week doing my due diligence. I read hundreds, often thousands of pages of documents. So it concerns me that there has been a missing piece, allegedly this one, that's tabled, given to me today. So I would also like some advice around what this is, where it's come from, and how we can change things so this never happens again. Thanks, CEO. And apologies, and so there is a lot in that. So should we potentially be laying this one on the table again? I haven't got my meeting procedures in front of me, but I think that potentially is possible. There are so many issues that have flown out of what's been discussed in this chamber today.
There are a lot of issues. Through you, Chair, if I turn to the community sentiment gathering aspect, I would, I think, appreciate some time to get proper advice on the most prudent way forward and to seek the views of councillors on the most prudent way forward collectively. The community sentiment gathered, the data that was gathered, the majority of residents that responded through the Shape Your Ipswich channel put forward eligible in line with the naming procedure considerations. Those on social media did not. I think that one option, not saying that I necessarily recommend this, would be to conduct a fresh community engagement process with very clear terms that gathered your community sentiment from whatever means you deem to be appropriate and gave you a true view as to the community sentiment on this matter. But there would be other options. So I think considering it in haste would not be right. So I think if I could at least be provided with some time to come back with you with considered advice, that would be appreciated if you're open to that.
I guess if I could jump in there, we did follow the community engagement policy. The decision by council was to dename, and the idea was to go out to find other names. It wasn't to re-prosecute the decision of the landowners. We followed the naming procedures policy. We went to the landowners. Every single landowner came back to us except for one, and all of them wanted the name changed. So that decision has been made to re-prosecute, to have the name of Paul Pasali, and who was convicted of more than 30 serious crimes, including fraud, official corruption, extortion, 2 counts of sexual assault. Pasali's sexual assault victim was a young woman who was 23 years of age. She was assaulted while visiting council chambers. And as the mayor and as a woman, I cannot pretend that this is okay. So I expect robust commentary on social media. I make no apologies for the decision of this council to rename this asset. Every Facebook comment and the media statement requested people to make their comments to be made on Shape Your Ipswich, and that's what was tabled. Thank you. Before I go to you, Councillor Jonick, is anyone else who'd like to make a comment? Yes, Councillor Megan.
Thank you, Mayor. I take all the comments that have been made in this discussion, the debate on this matter so far, with full respect, and I now likewise feel myself in a position where coming into this place to make informed decisioning with all information available at hand up to the time of decisioning, a bit blurred. With all due respect to everybody, I feel that I'm unable to do that. And regardless of which way or the other, whatever the opinion may be of any individual across the city, to dename or not dename, to rename those assets or not, is not so much the point here for me. For me, it is for me to fully discharge my responsibility to the residents of this city in representing them in making an informed decision on their behalf. I feel that I am unable to do that in this instance. I need further time to consider this matter. If depending on how it follows from here, I take my decisioning very cautiously.
I'm going to let every other councillor speak, but you had a long discussion, Councillor Jonick, yes. Thank you. Are there any other councillors who'd like to speak? Yes, Councillor Tully.
Yes, Mayor, I know this is a very sensitive issue for a lot of reasons. I've listened to Councillor Jonick and to the CEO in relation to these matters. Just a couple of aspects that I'd like to raise. One is the community sentiment is different from necessarily from formal responses. And you referred to my comment about the new town plan or town planning submissions. That's a different situation where a Facebook comments can't be a formal submission. If people on a town planning issue, like the new town plan, made a comment that, you know, about flooding or whatever, that doesn't constitute a matter that it might be relevant, but it doesn't follow the statutory provisions for formal representations or submissions in relation to the planning scheme. I think we need to be very careful in relation to utilising social media, but I do note that we talked about community sentiment, which goes beyond formal submissions. The other thing is twofold. One is in relation to the naming of Pasali Drive at Yamanto. That was not named after Paul Pasali. The records of the council and in the public media clearly show that it was named after Maria and Joe, or Giuseppe Pasali. Giuseppe used to be a worker in this council. They came from Ipswich. I came to Ipswich in the period of 1949 to 1950. And I think as councillors, we need to be careful in relation to naming something after whom there have been no allegations against Maria or Joe Pasali of wrongdoing. The other thing is that the naming of, and this really hasn't come out in the last 6 or 12 months, is that originally the Paul Pasali Bridge at Springfield Central was named by the Springfield Land Corporation. They actually named that bridge before they handed it over to council. And that was at a ceremony attended by perhaps 700 or 800 people. I'm not sure if Councillor Ireland was there. It was an evening ceremony on Sinnathamby Boulevard. That was named, fully named and signposted by Springfield Land Corporation before it was handed over. Council subsequently regularised that because the naming formally of roads and bridges in the city is a responsibility on council roads for the council, but it was through Mr Sinnathamby and his company that was originally named. I just say that I think we need to, one thing we need to do is move on. This matter has been around for some considerable time, although it did arise again at the end of last year on the mayoral minute. So in the event that this motion is defeated, I'm giving notice that I have a foreshadowed motion, which I will move, and that council reinstate the names Pasali Drive at Yamanto and Paul Pasali Bridge at Springfield Central.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tully. Just in one of the things that you've raised there with Springfield Land Corporation, I did write to them over a year ago. They have informed me that they were informed by council to name it that way. That's why they did it. They said there was no way they would have named it that way unless they were told by council to do it. I do know for the record that their name went up before. Actually, while we're on this topic, Councillor Tully, do you mind taking me through the process? Because obviously you're the planning committee chair, and my understanding is that it was former Councillor Charlie Pasali that nominated his parents. Is that correct?
Well, in relation to, you're referring to Pasali Drive? Specifically?
Yes, Pasali Drive.
No, I can't remember the exact detail. I do know that it was proposed and adopted by council officers. My recollection was that it didn't go to a council meeting, that it was approved by a council officer under delegation. In relation to the Pasali Bridge, I'm unaware of any direction or even suggestion in relation to that. I recall the evening when that was announced, and there was no indication or hint otherwise than because it was a private road at that stage, hadn't been handed over to council, and that decision by Springfield Land Corporation, as they were known at the time, was entirely theirs. If there was something else involved, I was never privy to that.
Thank you. I'm happy to share that correspondence with everyone here.
Thank you.
With that, just going back, Councillor Tully, to the naming. Obviously, I've gone through how this actually happened. So the reports that I received that former Councillor Charlie Pasali nominated his parents. Was a conflict of interest ever declared when that was done?
I don't recall the details of that or at all, because that was 10 years ago, and councillors, including myself, would have seen, over a period of 3, 4 or 5 years or more, would have seen hundreds of reports, including naming reports.
So it wouldn't surprise you to know that.
Sorry?
It wouldn't surprise that no conflict of interest was declared.
I don't know.
Okay. And it then went to yourself as the planning committee, and I believe you had a process in place when something like this was named?
There were two processes for naming of bridges or roads. One was that it could go to a planning committee to make a recommendation to a council meeting. The other was that a name that was proposed could be considered under delegation by the relevant officer who held the delegation to approve a name. That would then be sent to the divisional councillor and to myself as the chair of the relevant committee. We didn't have the power to approve or refuse a name. We did have the power to refer it to a committee, and if that didn't happen, it would then devolve back to the officer with the delegation to make the final decision.
So I've seen some email trails, and obviously in this case, you followed the process where you checked with the divisional councillor what their views were, and that was Councillor Charlie Pasali.
Well, the officers would have checked by that procedure through the delegation, not for me personally. If he made a response and it was back to the officer who held the delegation, that would be his response, as it would be any divisional councillor's response in respect of any matter of naming.
And Councillor Tully, what are your views on councillors nominating members of their family to be named for roads and council assets without a conflict of interest declared?
Well, there was no provision, as I understand it, in those days for a legal requirement for that declaration. That, as I understood it, and officers would have been aware, that all responses by councillors would have been in accordance with the legislation at the time.
And
I don't think we can apply a very clear current conflict of interest disclosures with times in the past, which could be 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I'd have to check what the conflict of interest provisions were back then, but there obviously conflict of interest provisions have been around for centuries. I guess the other thing, Councillor Tully, is in your view, what is your view today of councillors naming council assets after their family?
Well, that's an issue, but I don't think that's the matter to be debated today. You've had a series of questions. We have your motion before the council, and I think we're really diverging from the key issue that needs to be considered today. And I think as a council, we preferably today, we need to move on in the best interest of the city.
I think so, and I think noted that during the election campaign, 6 of the councillors in this room did vote to change the name of that particular asset. But I also know, before I go back to you, Councillor Johnny, also wanted to, now that everyone's had their say, as far as I know.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor. So the reason I raised this is not because of the name, right? It is because the sentiment of the community has been lost. So in the original motion, it asked to consider the community sentiment and options for the potential renaming. So the community sentiment is in the original report. If it doesn't align with what we want, we should still table it and move on with what our decision is anyway. That's open and transparent. If we disregard and hide over 6,000 people's contributions to something, what are we? What are we here for? Are we a token for democracy? I don't understand. I have lost faith in the reports that I receive not being altered in any way. And I want a trail of audit on what edits were applied to documents and emails to get to where we are from where we were. And this should be a priority for everyone here. Because 6,900 people participated in this engagement. I've seen the engagement on Facebook. I did not participate. So I question how many people were aware of it, read the commentary, picked up the sentiment, agreed, but moved on and didn't participate. So if we don't recognise these people and we only call out 25% of what we received because it doesn't align with our views, what are we doing here?
I think I would disagree. The comments from the public are not hidden. They are there. You can go onto the council Facebook page. You can see them there. None of the comments have been deleted or hidden. So to say that they're hidden is not accurate. And look, I'd also like to say when it came to data integrity, one person could make 6 different comments and they were counted as 6 of the 6,000, just letting you know, Councillor Johnny. And back to the mayoral motion that was passed, talked about the renaming. It talked about in that renaming going to the landholders. They made that decision to change it. And then the next step was for the renaming, not to re-prosecute, do you keep it the same name? It was to rename. So that's why the report that is before you is about what are the new names. Let's move on from the past and look at the new names that could be used. And that's what this report does.
I question the integrity of the data, and I also have faith in the original officer who signed off that she was one of the only people that had the qualifications to run and sign off on community engagement. I have faith in her systematic application of collating data and its accuracy, and I still have faith in that regardless. This report needs to be public. We need to not waste any more time. I see there's a $3,000 amount for renaming. That does not take into account the time of in-kind wage, shopping centre pop-ups, when we've got issues with our assets and maintaining them. Come on, guys, listen to the community. This is what I'm talking about.
With respect, I listen to my community every second of every day, and I too are very unhappy that we're continuing to talk about this and waste precious time and resources. I reiterate my position. Not aware of this report. I don't know the
actually
integrity.
told
Don't
you
even
there
know.
was a report altered.
Excuse me. Councillor Doyle had the floor. Do not...
She cut me off as well,
Excuse me,
ma'am.
Councillor Johnny. Councillor Doyle has the floor.
yeah, probably one of those vague, cryptic conversations where, you know, had I been given privy to that you had this in your possession, and had I been given it prior to anyway, look, I reiterate, CEO, I really need some advice around this because there's been a lot of allegations made today, and I really would like to know the way forward. Look, I'd seek some advice from audit and legal on this.
Mayor,
I
I
think
move
it's clear that we're
the
not going to
motion
make a
be put.
decision.
I move that the motion be put.
You move that the motion be put? Thank you. Well, you have to put that there. So Councillor Tully has moved a procedural motion that this motion be put, which means we would vote on it immediately now and not defer it or anything like that. So that motion has been moved by Councillor Tully, and I ask for a call of votes as to who supports that. So in the room we have Councillor Madsen, Councillor Island, Councillor Johnny, Councillor Tully have voted for that. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
We're voting just that the motion be put, is that correct?
Correct. And there's 4 votes on the floor for it.
I vote in the affirmative.
You vote the affirmative, so that means the matter will be put and decided on today. So the motion that's been put on are the 3 recommendations A through to C there now. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm the only one. Those against? Sorry? Oh, sorry, Councillor Fechner.
I'm abstaining from this vote.
You're abstaining. Those against? It's 0. Those abstaining? So I see all the other councillors who've abstained. Thank you, which is a negative. Thank you. So we have a foreshadowed motion.
Yes, Mayor, I'll just reread that, and I've forwarded it to the committee clerk. The council reinstate the names Pasali Drive at Yamando and Paul Pasali Bridge at Springfield Central. If there's a seconder, Mayor, I'll speak to that.
So that's the motion that Councillor Tully's put forward. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Island.
I'll be brief with this, Mr. Mayor, because I'm sorry, Mayor.
Mayor.
I had many years.
Know something I don't?
No, I'm sorry. Yes, the original motion last year was to dename and to rename, but there is nothing obviously in that motion that would prevent the renaming of an original name. I think as a council we need to move on. It's a matter that is quite sensitive, and you've certainly raised issues which councillors can take into account, the community can take into account. Councillor Johnnick has raised a number of issues, and I not referring to matters of change of reports or whatever, but the fact of the matter is that the report to council did not include the sentiments of a large number of people. I think that this is just an opportunity to make a decision once and for all. We're more than 2 years into this term of office and this matter is still around. It had been mooted with councillors, I think, in the first couple of months after the election about what might happen, and then it seemed to disappear off the agenda, not the physical agenda, but the agenda of discussion between councillors, and then became highlighted again with the motion at the end of last year. So all I say is this is an opportunity for our community to move on and make a final decision once and for all.
Ma'am? Sorry,
Yes,
may I, through you as chair, simply seek to raise that something that I have felt bound by in my actions is council's naming procedure, which so I'm wanting to bring to council's attention, which I'm sure you're aware. How would this foreshadowed motion comply with council's naming procedure?
Could I say something in response? The naming procedure, council has the right to name anything it wishes. The procedure doesn't bind councillors at a council meeting. We are free to, and I'll give you an example of that where that recently came up, that this council, as the corporate body, made a decision on a name, and that was to change the name of the community hub at Augustin Heights to formalise it to the Augustin Heights Community Hub, whereas another name had been placed on it without councillor consultation. Having a procedure in place, even having a policy in place, doesn't bind this council in making any decision it wants, either in relation to process, in relation to name, or in relation to compliance with procedures. We are the decision-making body. The Local Government Act makes it clear about the naming of roads. That includes a bridge element on roads, and this motion just seeks to exercise that power. Otherwise, we've got a procedure which is could be interpreted as preventing councils from doing things. I would be amazed that that could ever be interpreted as preventing us from making the final decision.
Councillor, may I ask what your views are on the fact that the landowners who wish to have it, they have told me that they're embarrassed that it's called Pasali Drive. What is your response to them?
Mayor, I'm not sure that I need to or should answer individual questions about this, but were the landowners advised about the history of the naming of Pasali Drive, for example? Were they aware that it was not named after the former mayor? In relation to the Pasali Bridge, were they advised that that was originally named by Springfield Land Corporation, now Springfield City Group? So those issues pale into insignificance when we talk about almost 7,000 people whose sentiments have not been recognised in the report that came to council today.
Thank you. And if I could just clarify, Springfield City Group have informed me, and like I said, I'll share that correspondence, that they were directed by council to put those names up there. And also, it wasn't actually 6,000 people. If someone put 6 comments down, they were listed as 6 of the 6,000 comments. Just to clarify that, because there were people who made multiple comments across multiple posts.
I'll just say that I haven't seen any of those comments. I don't track or trace, other Facebooks for that nature, or any other social media of that nature, but I rely on the indicative figures that were provided by Councillor Johnnick.
Okay. So any other discussion on the matter? Yes, Councillor Morgan?
I have a question in terms of the current situation with council having made resolution to dename. Legally, what is the name of the drive at Umanto that runs from Warwick Road to...
Until we rename it, excuse me. So at the moment, that's the whole idea of today, was to rename it, so we could have another name. So at the moment, you go there, you can see it says Pasali Drive.
So through the organisation, Chair, may I gain a lawful understanding as to what the current name of that drive is? It's in Division 4. It's my division, and I need to know what that is.
So, as my understanding that with Council's resolution of the 9th of December and the majority decision by the landholders, that the technical status is that it has been denamed. However, the sign remains, as people need to be directed and have an address, for their homes. So, but it has been denamed. Would be the technical position.
So legally, it is unnamed drive.
That's my understanding, yes.
We can't do that to people. what I'm inferring is we need to have a name on that drive.
Well, the sign is still,
Oh, a sign's a sign.
yes.
I can put up a sign to say don't walk on the grass, but doesn't mean people won't. Well, I mean, for legal documents, for registration of a mortgage.
It would certainly be preferable to have the matter resolved in the interests of all parties and certainly the landholders as quickly as possible. However, that's my understanding. I'm happy to be corrected by our General Manager, Planning and Regulatory Services if I'm not correct.
I think Mr Tabulo's coming.
Peter Tabulo, General Manager of Planning and Regulatory Services. There's no right or wrong answer, I suppose, because we're stuck in this limbo situation. Yes, Council has made the resolution to dename, but action hasn't been taken to actually change any formal documentation because it was waiting for this part of the process to be concluded. As the CEO said, there's still the signpost there. People would still be getting mail, all their documentation would still be in place as Pasali Drive. It's not until an ultimate decision is made by Council for a change of name, then formal processes would be put in place to make that change.
So as of today, it's called Pasali Drive?
Correct.
Okay, until paperwork is submitted to change it?
Yep.
I'll leave it.
Could I just clarify that? The motion was to dename it. Whether a sign remained or not, once it's denamed, it has no name, and I believe that road has no name. Now, you mentioned that there's a sign still there, but the word denaming was applied to a bridge and a road, and the sign was taken down on the bridge name, but not on the Pasali Drive. Now, I can understand the dilemma to the community in relation to that, but I have no doubt in my mind if the Pasali Bridge name has been denamed and Pasali Drive has been denamed, it must lawfully have no name at the moment. I can't see that there's any other possible view in relation to that.
As I said, we're in this limbo situation. Councillor Tully, a decision was taken not to take the name down of the drive.
Could you explain who made that decision?
I did.
But you made the decision to take the name of the bridge down?
Correct.
Okay.
Because that had lesser legal implication and risk to remove a bridge name. But if the road has got no name, what if there is an emergency there? We've seen situations of people getting lost, not knowing where to go, ambulances, fire brigades, police. It's a low risk because of the few number of actual properties that are there, but it's the principle in place. Just to remove a sign and suddenly it's got no status is a risk that I didn't want the organisation to take. I believed it was low risk to leave the name there for this period of time because we still hadn't resolved an actual name. Whereas the bridge was quite easy. It's an asset, name comes off. It has no risk or no impact with respect to wayfinding implications like that.
Chair, if I may. Thank you, CEO and Mr Tabulo, for the explanation given. I still hold strong concerns that in this city we have now got technically, or probably legally, a road. Who cares about the bridge? Call it bridge over troubled waters, I don't care. But for a street address, that is something of great concern. I'm not having a go at any person. I'm just stating fact about the situation in which we find ourselves in.
So
I'm not imbued with the wisdom of Solomon, but I would suggest that we need to, for our community, provide a name. if that be, we retain the status quo, I don't know, but we need to do something about that.
Thank you, Mr Tabulo. Are there any other discussions or questions? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those who wish that this is the active motion on the floor, that council reinstate the Port Pasali Bridge and the Springfield Central Pasali Drive name. Those in favour, please raise your hand. So Councillor Madsen, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Johnnick, Councillor Tully and Councillor Milligan have voted in the affirmative. Those against, I'll ask him, myself, Councillor Kunzelman and Councillor Doyle. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
I vote in the negative.
Thank you very much. So that has now resolved the issue. Thank you very much for the respectful debate. And I've just got to say, I'll move on.
Excuse me, Chair. Is it possible to call for a short break?
Yes. So I'd like to move for a 15-minute break. So it's now 2:21. So come back at 2:36. Thank you very much. May I have a vote on that? Those in favour? It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back to the Ordinary Council, the 30th of June. We've now come back from an adjournment. It's 2:37 p.m. We are still on business outstanding, and there were some matters that were referred from the to this meeting. I'm looking at 14.2, which is the procurement contract for Human Resource Information System from Deloitte Consulting. I did ask some questions at the time that has been provided to us. So I'm happy to move recommendations A through to D. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any other discussion?
I just wanted to say that we received that extra information in the email and commend the officers on that. Found it pretty comprehensive and covered off any issues. I had no issues with the original report, but committee members wanted more information, and I support them in that process.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments? No, I'll move the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. How do you vote, Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. 14.3 was also a matter that was outstanding that were referred. And this on the discontinuation of discounted dog registration classifications for obedience-trained dogs, Dogs Queensland members and farm dogs. And just as some background, this was reported to the Governance and Transparency Committee on the 16th of June. That committee made the decision to refer it to here because we knew there was quite a few views of people who aren't on the Governance and Transparency Committee. So the committee made the decision to defer it to this meeting. So all those who aren't on the G&T, as well as councillors who are on it, would have the opportunity to participate in this particular one. So the recommendation is that the report be received and contents noted. I was going to move because we actually have to pick an option. And as per the G&T, my preference, I guess, is, my understanding from councils for option 3, which is to reinstate the classifications. So yes, okay, I'll move that option 3 proceed. And Councillor Tully has seconded that. I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mayor.
Councillor Allen?
I have had some community requests for the Dogs Queensland fees to be reduced. They have always been given some consideration because they're already paying kennel fees and fees to Dog Queensland. So fully support item 3.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with Councillor Island's. I want to be on an island. Councillor Island's feedback within the community. Councillor Fechner and I have been approached by many Dogs Queensland members and responsible pet owners. I guess disappointed that the discount had been removed. I understand the discount that was given to Dogs Queensland members was negotiated by Dogs Queensland about 4 years ago, and that was not just with Ipswich City Council but with a number of relevant local authorities. So I think if we reinstate that discount, we, doing what our peers are also doing, and I guess rewarding responsible pet ownership, which is something we should be doing anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I have been approached by many residents as well who are very responsible dog owners who are very proud of their dogs and with their breeding, or if they've got them in their family, and believe that there's responsible dog owners that discount should remain. If there's no other discussion, I'll move the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to The reception, item 17, the reception and consideration of committee reports. And the first one is the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee report.
Sorry, Mayor, did you say 15 or 17?
17. Oh, sorry, 15.
15.
My apologies, the numbering's a bit out on my run sheet, my apologies. Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Item 15.1, which is the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee. And the recommendation, now I just have a double check here, there were some items here that were also not just to be noted, but a decision to be made, and my deputy in that one, what was it, just number 6?
Yes, Mayor, I believe it's number 6 is the only one that requires a specific adoption because it was a recommendation and not a decision.
Okay. In that case, as the chair of that committee, I'll move that items 1 to 5 and 7 to 11 be noted. Okay. And item 6 to be approved, endorsed. I'll let you, Vicky, put that up.
So is that consistent with what's on the screen?
No, it's not.
This doesn't add up.
We'll wait for the change.
Actually, I'm happy to keep it as you've got it there. I think that's the normal way you would do it, Vicky. Normal. Okay, so we do. So I'm happy if the GIW committee be noted with the exception of item 6 and then recommendation B be. Yeah, I think there'll be an A and then B.
Decision, isn't it? Is it decision? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not right.
That's okay. He's just going to get the actual name of item 6, which is the DA.
Apologies, Chair. May I invite the GM, may I ask you to invite the GM of Planning and Regulatory Services just to potentially seek to discuss and clarify this matter of whether it's a recommendation or a decision?
Okay.
Could I just say it's in the minutes of the meeting as a recommendation? So I think it speaks for itself in my view.
I'll invite
Peter Tabulo, General Manager of Planning and Regulatory Services. Councillors, the terms of reference for the GIW were specifically written that it is a council as a whole and the decisions of that committee are binding on the floor of council or on the floor of the committee. The reports are written as to say that the recommendation that council approve, that's how the wording has been reflected in the committee reports, but the committee of the GIW makes decisions there and then, and the planning department action those decisions straight away. So that was the whole intent of having it, the committee as a whole. So when
actually, I'll concur with you, Mr. Tabulo. If you go to the minutes, it does say there was a decision made.
Well, then could I say why is the heading to that, above that, recommendation? I would also make the point that even though a power is delegated to a body, a committee or to an organisation, that doesn't mean automatically that every decision or interpretation has to be an exercise of that delegation. It can be, but there's no requirement that it be. And that's, I was just reading the report to us before the council today that was simply a recommendation.
Mayor, if I may comment, if Councillor Tully, we had ourselves in a situation under your hypothesis that council was then going to overturn the decisions made at the GIW or modify the decision at the GIW, then it defeats the purpose of having the committee as a whole making those decisions, because we have actioned it. The letter's gone out, the decision's been made to approve that when it's a planning matter with a development application.
I've not said that once a decision is made under delegation that it can be overturned. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Once a decision is made under delegation, it is a decision of the Ipswich City Council and should be given effect to. What I was looking at is one particular item where it was not described as a decision. So it's certainly not any suggestion. I've never made that. I never would, that a decision once made can simply be over at a committee or via an officer could ever be overturned in that fashion. And that's not legally possible.
No, can I just clarify? If you go to the GOW paper, the minutes that we have, which is page 84 of 312, it does say that a decision was made.
Well, then those minutes have to be changed to delete the word recommendation.
I did notice that in that item 6 and 7, they both have the word recommendation and the others don't. So maybe that was, I guess I'll see if that was a typo. And same with item 4. So there's some inconsistency. Item 4, 6 and 7 don't have the word recommendation. So do have the word recommendation in there. Yes. So I'll take that. Okay, so the minute secretary has told me that was her error to keep that there. So the decision was made, which means I'll revert back to the original recommendation. I'll just give you time, Councillor Tully.
So it's, can I just clarify, please? Sure. It's item 4 in that report, is that correct?
Yeah.
Item 4, yes. What, 6? Yes, we're
Yeah,
right.
page 80, it also has recommendation, and also item 7, there also
7,
has the
yeah,
word,
yeah.
and I think, Vicky, the minute secretary has let us know that that was a typo, that word recommendation.
Yeah.
So we remove that?
If the officers proceeded on the basis of what actually occurred at the meeting, that it was a decision, I'm happy to, subject to the amendment of those minutes in the meeting, in this meeting, to clearly state that they were a decision made at the committee meeting.
Okay. So I think what we'll say is if we could remove the word recommendation 3 times throughout the minutes. Sorry, Councillor Jones, did you have something you wish to?
Sorry, I was just looking at item 4, Mayor, and it had the recommendation and then it followed with the decision, clearly. Oh, yeah. So.
Yeah, and same with item 7, same. So I think the minute clerk has submitted. So we'll take. So if it's okay, what we'll do is this: we'll note this report, but also ask for the 3 times there's the word recommendation, which should have been taken out. And I'm getting a nod from Councillor Tully. Would that be correct?
Sorry, yes, I'm agreeable to that.
Yep. Thank you. So I'll just refer people to 15.1. I'll move that. Councillor Tully, do you second that? You second that?
Yes, I do.
Any other discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Now move on to the Governance and Transparency Committee, and I'll hand over to that chair to see how they'd like to move that and proceed.
Yeah, I'd like to move that as per the recommendation. Which
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Would you like to speak to it at all?
just to say we had a pretty good meeting. We had, as always, we got a great deputy chair, Councillor Milligan. We had some information come through in that email on top of the information relating to that earlier matter. I'm sorry, got a bit tongue-tied, and I'm comfortable with the recommendations made by the committee. Open to any commentary from the floor, if any.
No other comments. I'll move recommendation 15.2. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Is this the whole report? Yes. You did have a comment, sorry. Well, I'll ask people, I'll retract. What comment would you like?
Excuse me, Chair, I've been alerted that you don't have your mic on, Councillor Tully.
You don't want me to repeat that?
I don't, but the community may.
Okay. I just made the point that besides getting a copy of the current policy and the new policy or the new proposed policy, that councillors be provided with a track copy so that we can easily see the minor changes, the major changes and additions and deletions very quickly.
Through you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Tully. Yes, we will ensure that going forward.
Okay, the question I have is in relation to the addition on page 1 of the policy document. Councillors will notice that there's flexibility to approve alcohol at cemeteries and conservation estates and halls and local parks and Harding's Paddock and so on and the Rosewood Showgrounds. And we've just got the one word Willowbank that's been put in there as a permanent designated public place. We haven't designated which part of Willowbank. Like the way it reads, it could be the entire suburb. Could be declared as a where footpaths and reserves and everywhere there. I do think it needs a couple of more words at least to describe which part of Willowbank it is or which parts of it is, rather than just the name of an entire suburb. Because I know the councillors for there might be concerned if there was legal drinking up and down all the streets.
For clarity for everyone, that's page 214 of that committee.
I was going to ask the relevant council officer, but I think he's on leave. I guess we have clarification. It looks like it's for the entire suburb. I'm just rereading the report. There is no clarification. It does say on page 210, under purpose and purpose, Willowbank was inadvertently overlooked. So I ask CEO, is there someone who could assist with that?
I think it's, unless anyone wants to leap to the lectern, I think it's safe to assume that that does need clarification and further definition. So just wondering the best way to do that.
I would be happy to amend what I've moved for this policy. So item 12 of the Governance and Transparency Committee to be deferred until clarification has been provided on where in Willowbank. If
Yes, it could be the Raceway, who knows?
If the council's comfortable with that.
Would be intended to be, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, Vicky, was that clear? Yeah. Until clarification is provided on where in Willowbank. That'd be just the one change, that one.
Okay.
I think that'd be clear.
You happy with that, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah. Through the chair, CEO, do you think that gives you clear guidance?
Yeah, absolutely, that'd be fine. We'll clarify as quickly as we can and follow the right process to get it back to you if required. Thank you.
I'll just check with the seconder, Councillor Milligan. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. We now move to item 15.3, which is the report of the Community, Culture, Arts and Sports Committee. And I hand over to the chair of that committee for moving it and any discussion.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to move that Council adopt the recommendations of the Community, Culture, Arts and Sports Committee report number 5 of 2022 of the 16th of June 2022.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Fechner?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We'll now move on to item 15.4, which is the report of the Economic and Industry Development Committee for Council. I'll hand over to the chair of that committee to move.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd just like to move the recommendations of the committee, and I have no further commentary at this stage.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chambers. How do you vote, Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's unanimous and carried. Just double checking here. Move on to 15.5, which is the Environment Sustainability Committee report. I'll move over to the chair to move.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that the recommendations of the Environment Sustainability Committee, meeting number 5 of 2022 on the 16th of June, be adopted.
Thank you.
There were 5 items. Oh, sorry, I'll let you take a seconder.
And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. There were 5 items on the agenda, along with the confirmation of previous minutes. I have received no notification that any councillor, any member of that committee wishes to have them done individually, so I'll move in batch. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to highlight that potential acquisition of land in South Ripley. It's confidential in nature, but I look forward to sharing that with the community. Should meet some good environmental objectives, and it's one of those things that council does very well, but you know, many people are aware of it, but not everyone, and I think it's good to see some pretty pristine land looked at for acquisition.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other discussion? Put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you. Unanimous and carried. I'll move on to 15.6. Thank you, Councillor Madsen. And how do we manage Councillor Fechner?
Are you leaving, Councillor Fechner?
I'm just going to remove myself from the call, and the minute clerk will, thank you.
And she'll just text you to come back?
Call him.
Okay, thank you. So this is the report for the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee. I'll hand over to the chair to move and so on.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council adopt the recommendations from the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee held on the 5th of May. Sorry. That Council adopt the recommendations of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report number 5 of 2022 of the 16th of June.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess just a small update around Nicholas Street Precinct. We've welcomed the opening of our first 2 tenants down in the precinct, being Terry White and Jella Tissimo. I'd just like to highlight that Bob Slater, owner of Terry White Chemist, has been a small business owner here in our CBD for 43 years. So I was delighted that he's got one of our flagship stores opening on to Nicholas Street Precinct there. Thank you.
Just letting you know I'm back online. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fechner. And the Deputy Mayor's back as well. We're up to item 16.1, the CEO Organisational Performance Report for May 2022. Does anyone have any questions of the CEO? In that case, I'll move that report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion on the report? I guess I note, CEO, the progress on the new planning scheme and the importance of that. Thank you for that. And I also see that the workplace health and safety performance side of your report is, again, very impressive in regards to injury and incident rates are well below this time last year and tracking down consistently with 0 lost time injuries occurring since November 2021. That's quite impressive. And independent data managed by the LGAQ and Queensland Government showed that Ipswich City Council is the best performing council in the state for lost time injury. So thank you for your care of our workforce, CEO. Any other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. And carried. Thank you. We've dealt with item 16.2, the Wanless matter. We're now on to item 16.3, which is the 2022 federal election outcomes for the Ipswich region. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. Dan Heenan, Coordinator Major Projects and Advocacy.
Thank you, Mr Heenan. May I outline one thing when you started in council? Obviously it was when council created an advocacy team, and then just run us through the highlights of this report.
Sure. So I guess this is a report concerning the outcomes of the 2022 federal election, specifically for the Ipswich region. And I guess providing an overview of some of the activities that council undertook in relation to that. I guess with the approval of council's first advocacy plan this year, this was the first opportunity, I guess, for the organisation as a whole to advocate for our most critical projects. And I guess worth acknowledging also that there was a lot of work done by everyone in this room behind the scenes to assist and reinforce that messaging politically. The outcomes and commitments, I guess, are summarised pretty succinctly in the report, but we did have both major parties commit over 60 million, particularly in the Cedar Blair. We saw the Cedar Blair being of particular interest and criticality to the major parties. So I guess next steps for us really are for council to meet our federal members and to have a conversation really about how council can support the implementation and delivery of the significant commitments that we've received. So it's exciting.
Thank you, Mr Heenan. Any other questions of Mr Heenan? No. Thank you very much. I move that the report be received and contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzman. Appreciate that. Any discussion? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight the work of Mr Heenan. He's put a lot of effort into this and I think is partly responsible for some decent results that we got. I think we communicated well as a council at this federal election, certainly better than the former state election. I think we're on the right track to advocacy. We have a bit of maturing to go, but I'm confident now with the direction that Mr Heenan and the Economic Development Department have it proceeding in. I think that we can become a good player in this sort of space. It's an interesting space because in some ways it's, you know, artistic. In other ways it's just really reliant on a bit of luck and catching a bit of interest. People have different sort of electoral theories on expenditure. There's different analyses which show different things. But I think we're going about it in a pretty scientific way, trying to figure out what are the things that we can do that actually do influence. Yeah, there's some analysis that I've previously shared that The Guardian published that was really interesting on election commitments. Not all election commitments are made in marginal seats. Some are made in safe seats. Some are made in very safe seats. And it depends on the programs. The other thing too is no election's ever the same. So I think we'll continue to work on it. We'll continue to adapt and respond to what's happening politically. And we'll see what happens in future years.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For my commentary, councils only receive 3% of the taxes that are paid, and the federal government get about 80% and the state about 17%. It's a big part of what a council does because we're so grassroots. We provide the maintenance for 78% of the road network, do all the waste and many other things. We can't do our job without funding from the federal and state governments. It's very important that we advocate well and do that in an effective way. So thank you, Mr. Hennon. I think you started about a month or two before this new council started, so you had to start from scratch. And I thank you very much for assisting us through this process. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to item 16.4, which is the residential curbside recycling contract with Visy Paper. And there are 3 recommendations there. In particular, it's for a contract with Visy with an approximate purchase price of $3.5 million ex GST over 2 years. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this contract? No? In that case, I will move all 3 recommendations together. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Tully. Any discussion? There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative, thank you.
It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to Iodm 16.5, which is the development application recommendation for a minor change request for a material change of use for outdoor entertainment, circuit raceway and driver training facility. And the recommendation is that council approve development application 2464/2022/MAMC, subject to conditions as contained in attachment 1 of the report. May I have the relevant council officer to the lectern, please?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. Michael Simmons, Development Assessment West Manager.
Thank you. Mr Simmons, so at the moment the raceway there can't do driver training, is that what you're saying?
Yes, they do, yes.
Right. And what are the main implications if this was approved?
Not necessarily any implications. Essentially what they're doing is they're taking what they already had approved and then moving it on site. So they already had corporate entertainment suites approved on a particular part of the site. They're simply looking to relocate that so that they sit above the pits.
Just the facility?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of the council officer? No, thank you.
No worries, thank you.
In that case, I'll move the recommendation here. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Allen, did you? I was wondering if Division 1 would comment.
Mayor, I was wondering if it will be possible for the Mayor and Councillors to go out and have a look at all the new changes out at Queensland Raceway to understand the road conditions and the number of motorsports that are now along the road.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any problem. Might speak to Councillor Jonik as the chair of the...
Mayor, just for further clarification, Councillor Ireland and I were out there for a separate issue that popped up, and it is quite impressive what's happening on site there. It's a facility reborn. I'll let Councillor Jonik speak to it more if she wants to. We'll just, defer to Councillor Jonik as always.
I think with a new ownership, it's been great.
It's obviously busy. It's always been a passion of a lot of Ipswich residents, and it's just getting busier, I guess, when we've got new players coming into the mix. And I was out there on Sunday at the dirt carts, I might add. I would welcome a road trip to the motorsport precinct to have a look at its current state and the number of cars and trucks and conditions of the infrastructure as well. That sounds great.
Thank you. If there's no other discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Move on to item 16.6, which is the provisional project approval. And the recommendation is that the council approve the provisional project listed in this report to proceed to design and construction in accordance with the capital investment in provisional projects policy. I note that it's in Division 2. Would Division 2 councillors wish to move or second that?
Yeah, I'd like to move that. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
And I'll second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Johnny?
Certainly, thank you, Mayor. So, like I mentioned earlier with the petition, Ed runs youth chess clubs on school holidays, and he has been doing so for several years. I've met him through Councillor Ireland, so I thank her for the connection. This provisional project is really meaningful because it will have chess tables out in the open at Rebel Domain, activating a space that isn't otherwise activated other than with markets. They will be accessible for all abilities, including disabled access, and it will really promote the outdoor activities that we already have there. So Ed is absolutely beside himself that that this might go through, and he wants to have a soft launch there and invite some chess champions to do a playoff. One champion plays 10 people at a time. I'm really looking forward to see this go through today for the community and for Ed.
Mas, do we know whereabouts it's going to be? Because I know in the petition there were 3 locations mentioned. There was Springfield Lakes, there was Rebel Domain and Orion mentioned, and the drawing wasn't clear.
So Springfield Central, Rebel Domain Parklands.
Yes.
Currently, the footpath from the USQ over to the Orion Shopping Centre. Okay. Before you go over, there's that right side with the trees there, open space, kind of corridors, and it would look great to have the chess tables lined up there and have kids there playing.
Thank you. Councillor Tully is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I'll be brief in the comments. Obviously, I'm supportive of this. It's in a good location, adjacent, as the Councillor Ireland said, adjacent to John Nugent Way. It's a highly trafficked area for people attending that area, and or to the students at the University of Southern Queensland and the medical precinct actually beyond that. I think we should have a playoff between, certainly between all councillors. Councillor Fechner might want to start off with put $1,000 in each, and the last man or woman standing collects the lot.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. Any other discussion?
Mayor, I'd just like to say that you see chess boards or on the ground, if you travel overseas, they're pretty prevalent in most places that you go to overseas. So it's good to see that Ed's able to get this out into the open for more people to join up. Not everyone plays sport, so for those that need a little bit more brain activity, I think this is a great job.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. If there's no more discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. That's carried. Next item is 16.7, which is changes to local roads proposed by the Inland Rail Project. And the recommendation is that Council endorse the proposals for the 6-road rail interfaces between local roads and the proposed Inland Rail Project in the Ipswich region, as the most appropriate outcomes. Now, in reading through this, the entire part of the report is confidential. So I am going to ask to go into closed session. So I move that in accordance with 254J3, that we close the meeting to discuss a matter of the local government is required to keep confidential under the law of formal arrangement with the Commonwealth or State. So it's item I under that clause of the local government regulations. The meeting move into closed session to discuss inland rail. I'll now call for a vote for that. May I please have a... It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. have you got the? Yes. Thank you. We're back live, Harrison. Thank you. Well, thank you. We've just come back out of closed session, and just letting you know that the reason for that is that Council has undertaken a confidentiality and a conflict of interest deed with ARTC in regards to this, so we are not allowed to discuss things that they haven't announced yet. Otherwise, we would be very open with that. So I'm proposing a different recommendation than what is there, based on discussion. And Vicky's putting that up. And that is A, that Council endorse the proposals for the first 4 road rail interfaces between local roads and proposed inland rail project in the Ipswich region, as outlined in Table 1, as the most appropriate outcomes. And B, that Council rejects the proposals for the 5th and 6th road rail interfaces between local roads and proposed inland rail projects in the Ipswich region as unacceptable outcomes. Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, actually, thank you, Councillor Ireland. Any other discussion, noting we can't name places or anything like that?
Thank you, Mayor. I can speak at a high level.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say Inland Rail is a project of a size and scale and funding that you rarely see in a country like Australia. And my views are that the community doesn't have to pay the cost for it to be economically viable. That's for the proposed rail operator to do. It's not for the people of Grantchester and Mount Mort and Calvert and Ebenezer and all the sections in our community. It's not for them to pay the cost of, you know, all the externalities. That's for the proposed operator.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chambers. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We're on to 16.7, which is the repeal of policies related to animal management and environmental fees and charges. And this report seeks to repeal the animal management fees and charges policy, dog registration policy and population health environment protection licensing registration and permitting policy as a result of them being superseded with the adoption of the 2022-2023 fees and charges. I'll move the recommendation that is in the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion on this? No, in that case I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Sorry? Oh, it's Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative,
Thank
you,
you.
Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We're up to item 16.9, which is the monthly performance report for May. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. Paul Mollenhauer, Acting Chief Financial Officer.
Well, I appreciate today's the last day of the financial year and this is the May report. But do you have any issues or concerns that you'd like to highlight to the council and to our residents?
Mayor, there's, I suppose, the ongoing themes that we've been reporting back through the report have continued into May and will likely continue into June. Mayor and Councillors will note we're reporting, sorry if I pull back to the right part of the report there, we're still reporting an operating deficit for the month of May. That operating deficit will improve with transactions through, standard transactions through the month of June and come closer back to our total budgeted deficit position. The budgeted deficit for May is 7.1, so there's quite a gap there. There are a few issues or a few transactions that get into the mix or come into the mix and play in there. We've got a lot of expenditure related to the flood, which is noted in the report. We've got some grant monies that are flowing through that start to colour where that surplus looks and how it looks relative to its its budgeted position. And whilst that's an improvement on that position, it is something we will need to continue to monitor as we go through into June and then ultimately report on those financial accounts at the end of year. We're not necessarily in a bad position, but that improvement ahead of that budgeted position does need to consider those other matters.
In regards to flood recovery, because it obviously had a large impact to our budget that we passed this morning, how are we going with our application for grants with QRA? Are there some deadlines coming up, or how's that proceeding?
We've submitted our first our first submission back through to the QRA in relation to the first lot of flood expenditure. As noted in the report, the second claim, which will now take us over and above our initial $1 million advance, if it hasn't already gone, it will be very close to going. The team have done an assessment of where we think of a 4.7 that we've spent so far, we think we've got about 3.2 that's recoverable. That's obviously our internal assessment, not the QRA's assessment. We're reasonably confident with where that number goes, and obviously that there'll be certain elements in there that'll be subject to particular scrutiny, so there might be some ups, some downs in terms of where we go. We're also aware that the state's made an announcement through its budget of a figure of about $25 million in terms of flood recovery grants for Ipswich. We're yet to actually see exactly how that will be made up in terms of emergency response, betterment, etc. But we're continuing to work with the QRA on that issue.
We saw with the state budget recently that Iswitch is receiving $25.1 million. Is that on top of the QRA grants, or do we, as part of the QRA grants, tap into that 25.1?
We're continuing to seek clarity around that, right, whether or not that 25 includes, for example, the $1 million that we've already received. Yep. There's another $1 million that's been promised that we've received 300 of. So we'll continue to look for and report back through to Council on how much of that 25 is effectively already been announced versus captured again. Okay. So yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions of Mr. Mollenhauer. Does anyone else? No, thank you very much, Mr. Mollenhauer. I move that the report on Council's financial performance for the period ending the 31st of May 2022 be considered and noted by Council. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
Affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Now, item 16.10, which is the report on the Audit and Risk Management Committee. And the recommendation is that the report of the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the 25th of May be received and contents noted, and the recommendation contained therein be adopted. Does anyone have any questions of relevant council officers on this report? No, in that case, I'll move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous here. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. Well, now item 16.11, which is a late item, and the matter was determined of a significant nature, and approval has been given for this to be a late item. And it's the City of Ipswich severe weather of February 2022 recovery plan, July to September quarterly report, and there are 4 recommendations there. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officers any questions? No? Okay. In that case, I'll move all 4 recommendations together. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion on this? I guess if I could, as the chair of the LDMG, I'd like to thank the report here is very much a joint report. It's the local government working very closely with a number of departments in the state government and the federal government, in particular, not only QRA, but communities and housing. And I've been very vocal in my praise of the Department of Communities and Housing. They have done a phenomenal job in here since February, helping people and helping to house displaced people. It's a huge job here, and I don't know if Councillor Kunzelman is the chair of the Local Recovery Resilience Group, if you wish to speak to this report at all, or your opinions and views.
No, just that I'm very satisfied with the report, and it is a progress report. That's its format. And I agree with you that we've had some tremendous cooperation from our partners. And we look forward to continuing to fix everything up.
And keen to hear feedback from residents on, obviously there's a timeline and our responses and who we're working with. I do note on page 16 of my report, but I guess I'm not sure of the actual report itself. Talking about the recovery network activities, I do know that we've got a lot of statistics and numbers from different agencies, but at the moment we are recording a 0 for the number of displaced residents, and I think that's probably not an accurate figure, but it's very hard for us to find out. So if people are displaced, they can contact council, they can contact their state MPs, and we'll assist them and facilitate those introductions to the Department of Housing to help. But I see those emerging matters talking about we are concerned about the increase in homelessness and rough sleeping, and we'll be continuing to work with the state agencies on that. I do know the state government recently brought in a rental assistance package for 12 months to understanding that of the shortages of equipment and supplies. There is still a concern that there's insufficient data on residents outside the outreach and referral system, those people that haven't made themselves known but are in need and vulnerable. And I think the community's very, we've had 347 residents put their hand up for the Resilient Homes Fund. And I know there's some confusion there. They're not sure. They've received some money for like the $50,000 to fix up their home, but they're not sure they're getting bought back. So there is that confusion, but I do understand it also takes time for the state to process that. There's a lot of data and information. And there's the continuing issues with materials and service shortages. So we'll continue to work with the Department of Energy and Public Works with that as well. And I see some eyes from Councillor Tully. Did you wish to comment as well?
Just particularly, Mayor, in relation to that last comment of people getting some funding, I think up to 50,000, and perhaps in many or some other cases with their own money, they're a bit reluctant to spend that money. I've made this point previously. Now, if they're going to be bought back, and I think we've made our position fairly clear that decisions need to be made sooner rather than later. I would hope that that happens very soon, so that and I know officers were in Goodna looking through Mill Street, Enid Street, Cox Crescent and perhaps other streets just a few days ago. If those decisions can be, or the initial decisions can be made on the most badly flood-affected areas, not only of Ipswich, but of the other 36 councils in Queensland who are part of this process, that would bring a lot of relief and certainty to flood victims who just have bare shells and open walls in their homes and can't move back.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. Any other discussion? Thank you, Councillor Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. Not disregarding at all the amount of around-the-clock work that was undertaken during the impact of the event itself. The LDMG and the LDCC being activated and doing their job in an amazing way. But since, with the initiation of the recovery, that the partner agencies still are doing extremely extended hours and striving very hard to achieve the appropriate outcomes that are required for the people of our city. I'd also like to just point out the local recovery coordinator, Mr. Ben Pole, who has given diligent dedication to his role and strive very hard to be able to assist the local recovery and resilience group achieve the requirements that are to be met.
I'd like to thank Councillor Kunzelman as the chair of the Local Recovery Resilience Group, and yourself, Councillor Milligan, as the deputy chair of that, for your persistence. I know there were weekly meetings at some stage and follow-ups every day and so on, and I really appreciate the consistent effort that you're doing on top of your normal workload.
Not to forget our emergency management unit staff.
Yes. Who are here. Thank you very much. there's no other discussion, I'll move. We've already moved recommendations A through to D, and they've been seconded, so I'll move it to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to now to notices of motion. Just like to give notice that I'll be putting forward a mayoral motion in regards to the media and comms policy. I've emailed all of you a number of times just to include those lines, 2 lines again that were removed about transparency. So I'll put that forward for the next meeting.
Mayor, could I move a suspension of standing orders, please?
In regards to?
Yeah, well, I'll read the motion too, so for
Just so people could have some understanding why.
Yes, of course. I'll move that so much of the meeting procedures policy be suspended as necessary to enable the immediate consideration of a motion regarding a flood warning siren facility at Goodna.
Yep, more than happy to.
Mm-hmm.
You put that forward, so you.
Yeah. Well, I'm moving that as a procedural motion so that I can then move the substantive motion.
Okay, so Councillor Tully has moved a procedural motion to suspend standing orders so we can bring a matter forward. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner?
In the affirmative, thank you.
And I'll now move that Council apply to the Queensland Reconstruction Authority for funding for a flood siren warning facility at Goodna. If there's a seconder, I'll speak briefly to that. Thank you. Just briefly, I'd like to thank Councillor Ireland for advising me the other day that she'd been notified by an officer of the QRA, and I wasn't fully privy to the funding arrangements, but apparently the one at Grantham was funded by the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. Can I say this? Goodna had over 600 properties affected in the 2011 flood, almost 250 properties in the 2022 flood. Not all homes, a lot of businesses were involved in those as well. Now, the issue arises about SMS alerts, and councillors would be aware that I've previously raised the issue. SMS alerts are fantastic, but the anecdotal evidence is that in the early hours of the morning in particular, many people will either have turned their phones off or turned them down or sleep through an alert which comes through in those hours from perhaps even 10 or 11 o'clock at night through until 6 o'clock in the morning. And people whose English is not their first language, that is another issue that is quite critical in Goodna. Now, I think if we're successful with this funding, and it can be done before the start of the next flood season, hopefully, this will be an opportunity for other areas of the city that have been affected, particularly I'm thinking of the Bundamba areas, North Booval, Brassel, Carolee, perhaps some other areas where the geography of the area, the number of properties involved would lend themselves to similar siren facilities. I believe there's multiple sirens in the Somerset Regional Council area. This is just really an opportunity for, and I believe there's some potential funding or indicative funding that we in the budget, but this is to formalise an application by the officers to the QRA, hopefully within the next week or so, that we can get in early at the start of the financial year. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Johnick. I think, Councillor Doyle, we should just speak to this.
Is there a way we can include Bundamba? Is there a way we can include Bundamba on that, noting we've previously talked about the benefit of warning sirens, and also noting Bundamba is home to a number of non-English speaking residents, and there are 2 instances, 2 addresses where those residents were fleeing in the dark at 10 p.m. at night. For one of them, they opened the pens for their animals and ran for their life, and for the second address, they had to use a ladder to scale their back fence to get out. So just the topography, geography down there on Bundamba Creek lends itself to a very dangerous situation when the waters rise quickly.
I take that in the form of the question. I understand that, and that's why I made reference to those other ones. I don't know how much funding is available. I do know that Goodna is the most seriously affected and will always be almost certainly the most seriously and first affected area of the city. I don't want to see, even though I support sirens as required, we don't want to weaken our position by making a request for multiple facilities from day one. If there's an indication, if this is carried, if there's an indication from the QRA that there may be funding for multiple sites, I think we should jump in early as well and identify those sites as well. But I certainly, being acutely familiar with the 2011 and 2022 floods, I don't want to reduce the likelihood of flooding because we're asking for more than one site initially.
Yeah. If I could, and obviously, just to give some background, I think Councillor Tully put a late report in, and I, as you know, I contacted you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to find some more about, and you didn't contact me back. Today I was accused of using wedge politics for raising things at the last minute. So I just want to state the fact that that I'm always open for those discussions. And as I discussed with you this morning, Councillor Tully, you know, we in our budget we have I think 5 to 7 flood sirens and cameras that we're looking at and going through that process with QRA. And I would concur with Councillor Dore that we shouldn't just be looking for Goodna, it should be also Bundamba and North Baval as well.
Yeah, I'm certainly, I hope you don't think that I'm engaging in wedge politics, because this, pretty simple. I'll tell you, it'll take 15 seconds, because at federal level, quite often. I don't know how we formulate something that identifies as our, I'd be happy if there was an amendment that included our number one priority as Goodna and number two as Bundamba, if councillors see that as the priorities, but I think we should be very clear with the QRA, and I just can't go past the absolute need at Goodna based on numbers of flooded properties. In both floods, 11 years apart, Goodna was the most seriously affected, and I think we should identify that in any application as our number one. And if Councillor Doyle is agreeable, I'm happy to incorporate that we include Goodna as our number one preferred and Bundamba as well.
And I'm looking at Mr Pinder here, correct, but obviously I know the last event in February, March, whilst there are more homes impacted in Goodna, if you combine the homes in Bundamba and North Baval, there was actually more homes impacted, I think. So I think it's really important to have those three areas, but open for discussion if you wish to prioritise. Okay,
well, perhaps we can fashion an amendment now. I just make the point the ones at Goodna is in a very confined area of probably less than 1 square kilometre, about 800 metres north and south and about 1 kilometre to north, east and west approximately. So it's in a very small and highly high density area of residents in that area.
And like I said, it's in our budget anyway, I think for 5 or 7 sirens and cameras.
But this specifies a particular way forward rather than just a general application, and suddenly they decide to, put one at Leichhardt or one.
So would you be open to a variation to that to include Bundamba and North Baval to that? Including Bundamba and North Baval, but I would accept the amendment if it indicated as Goodna as the number one priority. So in priority order? Yes, I'm happy to do that. So I guess I'm asking for a variation which will have the council apply to the QRA for funding for flood siren warning facility in priority order, Goodna, Bundamba, North Baval. Yes. Is that okay with you? Yes. Thank you. And that's not trickery involved in my part. That's something that Councillor Johnnick and I are acutely aware of, and what's likely to happen at the next flood as well. We don't want people sleeping through in their homes and the SES having to rescue them when there's 3 or 4 metres of water around their homes. Yep.
Can I add, through you, Chair, that the modelling of the flooding on our dashboard for Goodna didn't come through until the 27th because of the way that the data is collated through the gauges, being the closest one at Moggle to Goodna. So while the flood modelling, and this is just one factor that did contribute to obviously people still in their homes in Goodna when the levels were rising on Saturday night, but it's really simple to have a siren that will just echo through any language barriers. And I think you look at that 27th, which is the Sunday, that was the night that SEQ Water made all those releases from Ivanhoe Dam.
Can I just add that I think it was an opportunity. No two floods are alike, and
Yeah.
you can look at places in Ipswich which had a lower flood in 2022 and places in Brisbane which had much higher flooding. You know, there was no clear evidence in that. I think the traditional thinking was that whatever came down the Brisbane River and Bremer River systems would be the main influence on the flooding in Brisbane. Well, that certainly didn't happen this time. South Bank's a good example where the above ground area didn't flood. It did in 2011.
Yeah.
And
Thank you. It was very different. Okay, so that's the motion standing before us. Any other discussion, Councillor Milligan?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I'd also probably suggest that we, as the elected reps, don't contain just three specific. If you're going to add extras, I acknowledge the statement of Councillor Tully in that Goodna is the most intensely impacted. But I would prefer that specialist technical officers determine what other areas may require any warning devices for the preservation of life in such an event. So I would suggest including after and north of Vowel to include and other areas.
Can I just say, we've already got the funding and the budget, we're doing this, and the council officers are already doing that. So we're asking basically a resolution of work that's already is already started. So.
Can I clarify that? But we don't have the approval for funding from QRA yet.
No, well, obviously we're going through the process but we do have funding in it.
Yes.
I did check.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I'm happy if Councillor Milligan wanted. Obviously, the other big one is Carolee, and if that word went in with the general words after that and other areas that may need to be identified or to be identified.
Currently at Marburg, they utilise the QFES auxiliary fire station siren. So, there are other areas. So, I just wouldn't want we as the elected group to discount anything. I think that should. If we put other areas, then that's available for the specialist technical officer to determine.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? I'll just double check we did have someone second that. Councillor John, yes. If there's no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Fechner, how do you vote?
In the affirmative, thank you.
Thank you. Item 20, do we have any questions on notice? Yes, Councillor Johnny.
May I ask the CEO for clarification on something, on a matter? Do I need to suspend standing orders
yes,
for
or
that?
is it? Can you discuss it with the afterwards, or is it something you
It's just in relation to the clarification of the meeting procedures for the circulation of the report on item 14.1.
I guess you'd have to. You would put a question on notice. The question on notice to the CEO is.
Well, can I please suspend standing orders?
Yep. So you just.
So I'm just seeking clarification.
No, actually, you need to suspend standing orders. You need to go through the process.
Yeah, well. I want to ask a question now, I guess.
What?
Am I allowed to? For a clarification.
Oh, you're asked just after a clarification.
Yes.
Is the okay? Yep.
Just in relation to the original engagement report that I circulated on 14.1 today, is that going to be included in the minutes based on section 11.1, 11.10.1 of the meeting procedures?
So I don't have any objection for that early version. That early version that was not authorised. I don't have any issue with that. Just note, as long as it's noted that it was an early version and not authorised. If that's okay. So I'll close the meeting at 4:09. Thank you very much, everyone.